I'm Tiffany Hayden with Teton Advisors. We are here today to talk about Teton One Earth. We would like to talk about the forever chemicals and now introduce Mark Gabelli, who will now talk about Teton and Teton One Earth policy in additional detail.
Thank you, Tiffany, and welcome everybody. Teton Advisors is quoted on the OTC markets, TETAA. We are a listed business, was spun out of GAMCO Investors more than 2 decades ago, and have continued to compound wealth for our investors through investing in smaller companies. We do that bottom up, fundamental, and we're active. Teton One Earth is a policy we've implemented, is an integrative approach into our research and communication with companies, and it's an ongoing process following the dynamics of the CFA Institute. I'd like now to get into the core of our presentation and talk about PFAS. And with me, we are with Wayne Pacent and Rosemary Morabelli, and we're going to talk about stocks, investing, and of course, the threat that's upon us as a society with regards to polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS. So PFAS, the forever chemicals, there's over 600 compounds and quite actually a few more as we look at variations. There's an increased public concern of PFAS. Why? Ultimately, PFAS have environmental and health risks. This is a serious concern. There are studies that PFAS increase cholesterol levels, affect the immune systems, and have a direct relationship to certain types of cancers. Recent studies have shown that PFAS are found in our drinking water, and what we'll learn about is they're very hard to remove. There are a whole handful of technologies and companies involved in those technologies that we as investors can invest in that are part of now what is this growing awareness and trend and overall part of our economy that is going to be oriented towards ultimately removing some of these man-made chemicals that have infiltrated our surroundings. So again, PFAS are synthetic chemicals. They've been used in a variety of industries, consumer products, because of their water and grease resistant properties. But it's those same properties that have made them persistent and useful that is causing this widespread contamination to both human health and the ecosystems. If we think of the overall scope for investment in PFAS, there are multiple sectors that we will address and outline. Let's turn to the next slide if we can. Part of our efforts at Gabelli are to bring value to our shareholders, our clients, through fundamental research. But at the same time, in following companies, we're following themes and investing in those themes. And in the context of the One Earth policy, we're investing those themes to also bring heightened awareness to the companies themselves, and then, of course, to our constituents, our clients. This is a serious issue. It is only now becoming more understood by society and by the investment public. Regulation is an important part of this becoming a component both for an investment universe, but becoming a component for corporations to ultimately allocate capital to try to solve. If we think of it today, it is a nascent market size. It's expected that over the next 3 to 5 years, there'll be $50 billion of CapEx for wastewater utilities and water companies to spend. In the waste market itself, just to give you a sense, it's over $100 billion. That's just waste removal, waste disposal. And PFAS remediation today is negligible. It's estimated at roughly $2 billion, growing to about $16 billion. So high growth rates, and important as we think about this through the lens of overall investing. If we think of sectors, water treatment company, environmental testing and analysis businesses, chemical manufacturers. Certainly, chemical manufacturers have to work to find safer alternatives to PFAS non-toxic alternatives. And environmental service and remediation companies, we'll talk about a few of these. Sustainable materials and packaging is another entire sector, which is still, again, in a nascent stage. And then there's, of course, the services like environmental consultancy, and we'll talk about some of those. Those are found in some of the larger businesses, including Veolia in Europe. So let's turn the slide, please. There's a report that one could find on the Gabelli.com website and on the Teton advisors websites, produced just a few weeks ago, focusing on this phenomenon and bringing awareness to it. And we encourage those that are on this call to please go to Gabelli.com and read through the report and come to us with some of your questions. We at Gabelli offer several funds that are oriented around sustainability in the planet, including an ETF, Love Our Planet and People. And I'd encourage investors to also look into our website and look at ways to participate as a steward of your capital in some of these investment products. We plan to cover a few basic questions that will encompass, for the most part, the severity of the issue, but also what we can do today by both bringing awareness to the topic as investors, as stewards of your capital, and then, of course, for your own investment decisions. So how did we come to have PFAS in our lives? The first question that we'll talk about today. Why is it suddenly an issue today? Where is the regulator? And we'll get into some data on that. And then, of course, investment opportunities.
And I'll now introduce Anand to give us an overview of Teton 1 Earth.
Okay. Hi. Good morning. I am Anand Rawani. I am Director of Sustainability at Teton Advisors. I have been associated with the Gabelli Group for over a decade. PFAS, the forever chemicals, the topic of the discussion today. This is unique and inquisitive. I am sure participants will have plenty of questions, and we have experts with us. So please, I would say to participants that please save your questions for the Q&A session. Now, giving overview of Teton 1 Earth, we at Teton Advisors developed an integrative approach for considering ESG issues in our products' objective, investment process, and stewardship activities. Teton is a member and signatory of the UNPRI. We signed the principles February last year. As you know, Teton specializes in smaller company investing, while many smaller companies do not have their ESG principles articulated and transparent to investing public. We at Teton Advisors are excited to strengthen the next stage of our excellence in smaller company investing by incorporating ESG factors into our research and communication with the companies in which we are invested in. Our integrative approach is to align our clients' portfolios towards companies engaged in smart economic growth with respect to the planet. Teton 1 Earth policy has 4 pillars, and they are integrated research and communication, active proxy, risk management, monitoring, and sustainability. Teton 1 Earth is implemented using ESG research at its foundation, meaning it is built bottom up. This is not a policy of outright exclusion, rather one that respects investor rights and free market principles. As per Teton 1 Earth policy, we will adhere with the global ESG disclosure standards outlined by CFA Institute in their 2021 publication. This is a brief on Teton 1 Earth policy. I will encourage everyone to refer to our Teton 1 Earth webinar that was held on June 7th this year. You can find this on our website, www.tetonadv.com.
So now I'll introduce Rosemary.
So this is Rosemary. So how did we come to have PFAS in our lives? So PFAS, or polyfluoroalkyls, were invented in the 1930s as the main ingredient for non-stick and waterproofing coatings. They were first used to protect military equipment from the elements. Initially, the molecules consisted of a chain referred to as C8, formed with 8 carbon atoms and fluorine. Because the carbon-fluorine bond is one of the strongest, these chemicals do not degrade easily in the environment. This is the reason they are referred to as forever chemicals. First manufactured by 3M, industrial usage began in the 1940s when DuPont introduced them as Teflon for non-stick cookware. Their development increased in the late 1960s after a deadly fire above a US Navy aircraft carrier killed more than 100 individuals. So they became first widely used in products such as firefighting foams, one area on which the EPA is focused due to their extensive use at military bases, about 700 of them, around 50 airports, and firefighting activities for either fighting blazes or for drill exercises. These foams seep into the ground and eventually reach the water table. They are also carried to surface waters such as rivers and lakes by rain. So in addition to the firefighting foams, their oil stain resistance and waterproofing properties have resulted in their widespread use. They are in water-resistant textiles, stain-resistant furniture and carpets, cosmetics, paints, and toilet paper, among other consumer applications. They are also found in packaging used by fast food restaurants, as well as sandwich wrap, pizza boxes, and other packaging for greasy foods. Most of these eventually end up in landfills, from which they leach into the ground, and as I just mentioned, into the water table. There are now thousands of carbon-fluorine PFAS. The different properties and applications are based on the number of carbon and fluorine atoms, as well as other components. As a group, they are referred to as PFAS and have found their way into our drinking water, our food supply, and our bodies. So why are they suddenly an issue today? The issue is actually not as sudden as what might think. Based on earlier research in laboratories pointing out the health issues on rats, companies like 3M and DuPont were made aware of the potential harm from PFAS. But the warnings were ignored, and as was actually some of the company's internal data, which was pointing to similar concerns. So while PFAS are a broad group of thousands of chemicals with different properties and applications, a handful of them have been linked to health issues. Research, which has been focused on a few compounds, has confirmed their impact on our own health. For example, studies have found that approximately 98% of the Americans tested have PFAS in their bloodstream. The chemicals may enter the food chain in various ways. Then, over time, they gradually accumulate in our bodies. The most common and dangerous ones are PFOA and PFAS. These are the two main categories which have been extensively studied. They have been linked with kidney and testicular cancers, a lower immune system, thyroid disease, high cholesterol, and low birth weight in babies, just to name a few. PFAS have also been found in cow's milk, animal feed, and cereals, among other categories. These occurred in Maine, for example, where between 1992 and 1998, sludge from water treatment plants and from a paper mill was spread over farm fields as fertilizer. So now, in addition to the non-consumer and industrial applications already mentioned, the chemicals in the sludge have found their way into the food supply via crop products, dairy, and livestock. As a result, PFAS above acceptable levels have been found in beef and milk from farms located in Michigan, Wisconsin, New Mexico, Colorado, and Maine. While there are approximately 1,500 lawsuits at last count, the first one against manufacturers and users of PFAS occurred in the late 1990s. It was triggered when a farmer in West Virginia saw his cattle become sick and die after drinking water downstream from an unlined landfill where DuPont was dumping a sludge with high concentration of PFAS. In 2019, the movie Dark Waters, which focuses on the West Virginia case, introduced many Americans to the PFAS problems. So while specifically PFOA and PFOS are no longer manufactured and used in the US, they do not degrade and therefore persist in the environment. And as a broad group, many PFAS are still manufactured and used globally. The state of Massachusetts is suing 13 companies, including DuPont and 3M, as PFAS have been found in rivers, lakes, ponds, and in the public water systems. Once in the water or in the air, and they get to that via evaporation of contaminated water, the chemicals can spread everywhere. They have actually even been found in the blood of penguins and polar bears. The amount of contamination is extensive, persistent, and toxic at very low level. Improved regulations will be costly and help, but a full stop ban is unlikely, at least for now. So while the long chains have been phased out in the US, they are still used in other parts of the world and can come back in imported products or materials. The shorter chains, such as PFBS and Green X chemicals, are believed to still present health and environmental issues. So this summarizes how we came to have PFAS in our lives and what the issues are currently.
I'll take it from here. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Rosemary. So where's the regulator and where are the regulations coming in this PFAS situation? The regulators are a little late to the game, but we're finally starting to get some movement there. As mentioned, most large manufacturers of PFAS have already stopped manufacturing them in an attempt to avoid further litigation that Rosemary mentioned, including DuPont, 3M, Solvay, and Arkema. And we recently saw settlement agreements with DuPont and its spinoffs, Chemours and Corteva, settling with U.S. water systems, which cover around 88% of the water utilities in the country, for $1.2 billion, and 3M coming to a similar preliminary settlement shortly after for $10.3 billion. While these lawsuits were in the works for the past wrongs, and during that time they were being litigated, on March 14th, the EPA released its long-awaited proposal for the national standards for drinking water, limiting the legally acceptable amount for two of the most common PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFOS, to 4 parts per trillion. Now, 4 parts per trillion is extremely stringent. It's essentially completely eliminating it. And notably, that amount is down to the lowest current levels that technology can even detect. In addition, 4 other types of PFAS are being looked at to be regulated as a group. And these are preliminary proposed regulations. It's currently in a comment period, and the final rule is expected to be issued late this year or early 2024. Whether it's adopted as is or tweaked a little, water providers and utilities would need to comply with the final regulation within 3 years of adoption, implying by the end of 2026 or early 2024. While there may be some movement, we don't expect much. The USGS, if you go to the next slide, the USGS recently completed a study that made a lot of headlines that nearly half of the country's tap water may contain PFAS. They tested tap water samples from 700 residences across the country and found at least one PFAS compound in 45% of samples at levels that were higher than the proposed regulation. This made a lot of headlines. It even got in my local news for my community. So it's on people's minds big time. And we expect the final ruling to be pretty stringent no matter what. And then although there's been nothing official yet, we expect similar regulations in the waste management industry to avoid seepage from landfills, contaminating groundwater, which is one of the main ways it gets into drinking water. There's similar expectations in the industry that the EPA is expected at some point, maybe in the next year or so, to deem PFAS a hazardous material. And then waste management companies would be required to capture and contain it. And some are already taking steps to do that in order to get ahead of the regulations. Notably, there's still no government bans on manufacturing PFAS. While the large manufacturers stop making them, they're still produced in India and China, and even in the US and Europe in products made and shipped into the US. They're still being used particularly in construction products such as tiles, grout, countertops, and fiberboards for their ability to protect against oil, greases, and stains, and even found in things like pizza boxes and cat and dog food bags. So you could look to eventually see a complete ban, but nothing's on the table yet. So they're still around and getting into the environment. So that brings us to the next slide, investment opportunities. While we've discussed there's certainly going to be impact on the water utility companies to meet the drinking water standards, they're going to have to spend on testing and filtration. They'll pass that back through their rate base. Waste companies will have to implement measures to capture, contain, and remediate. They'll recoup those costs through their fees charged. We see that the testing companies will benefit from a general increase in water testing, but we think the companies that will benefit the most will be those offering, obviously, PFAS-related equipment and services. And if you go to the next slide, there's three widely recognized effective treatments to treat and remove PFAS from contaminated water. There's activated carbon, where water is filtered through activated carbon and the contaminants are absorbed. Membrane filtration using either nanofiltration or reverse osmosis. And ion exchange, where negatively charged ions from water are exchanged on a resin surface to filter contaminants out, as typically using a chloride resin. One of the most effective treatment filters is activated carbon. It's used in your catalytic converter in your car for emissions control. We just met with a company in Gabelli at their investor day in the city. They make it for that purpose, but it's a very effective filtration system. So they activate the carbon and it's able to filter out any contaminants really from water, but it's effective as a PFAS treatment. Then there's an ion exchange where they remove negatively charged ions from the water. They use that to separate from any negatively charged ions from contaminants. They run that through a filtration system. Usually it's a chloride resin that's used. And as I mentioned, Ecolab has some advancements there to make that even more effective. Membrane filtration is where they force water through a membrane using pressure. The contaminated water goes through. The water molecules are small enough where they pass through the membrane and the PFAS is contained.
And each one of these major three have different cost structures associated with them. So therefore, capital allocation at the corporate level, of course, will matter. You want to give any insights as to the capital requirements in terms of these major three?
It's up in the air, but all those companies we mentioned have those technologies already in place. So we think that they're going to be beneficiaries as waste management companies, utilities need to invest in this and need their technology. Some companies are listed here that we've identified offering these solutions and systems. They include Clean Harbors, Ecolab, Heritage Crystal Clean, Japanese companies Carrare, which bought Calgon activated carbon in the US, Charita Water, Hitachi Zosen, which makes water and waste treatment plants, Minerals Technologies with its novel fluor absorbent, Tetra Tech, Veolia Environment, and Xylem through its acquisition of Evoqua, which does water remediation. So we have a team of analysts, including me and Rosemary, who look at all these companies and all aspects of PFAS. We put out the white paper that Mark mentioned earlier. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to mention that we're planning on having a symposium on PFAS, and we're targeting a late September date. We'll hopefully be featuring a lot of these companies and doing a deep dive on the topic then.
Perfect. So in summary, thank you, Wayne. In summary, there are significant ongoing risks. It's a large market opportunity. And as Wayne just outlined at the corporate level, these well-trodden technologies are still ultimately unfolding. How companies will use them at the municipal level or develop and deploy for businesses or individual residences is still ultimately to be seen at a mass scale. And the regulatory structure and dynamics will help drive this. It's still in the early stages. All of us as a community can help drive this awareness. And again, what we do is we focus on stocks, individual businesses where we invest our client capital, and through an individual share, we're owning a fractional interest in an overall business and enterprise. And we do that for the long term as investors looking at assets, cash flows, and ultimately unique elements of the business's franchise that make them defensible. And we think that the mix of businesses that both have been outlined by Wayne and that you'll find in some of our investment products do carry those attributes. I appreciate your time today in reviewing really what is this unfolding arena for both investors, but more importantly for the public at large. It's through awareness, and it's through the constant changes at the regulator that the industry will continue to evolve at the corporate level, with capital being allocated towards different technologies. And keep in mind, these technologies exist today to help resolve part of the problem, but in terms of the pervasiveness of the problem and really how we as a society need to see that it's implemented, we do need the regulator to continue to kind of galvanize themselves at the local level, at the federal level, for this to evolve into more of a significant resolution for society. So now, thank you. We were joined today by Anand Rawani, who's our director of One Earth, Rosemary Morabelli and Wayne Pinsent, both part of the equity research and portfolio management team, and Tiffany Hayden from compliance. So thank you very much for the time today. And as we outlined, there will be a symposium coming up in the fall of this year to get into the topic further. We now have some questions from the field. The first question relates to actual stocks. We have a question coming in. Can you please talk about one or two companies with specifics as to where an investor can look? And then it looks like a follow-up to that, and which funds of yours can we participate in to take advantage of that? I'll hand that over to Wayne, maybe, if I can.
Yeah, I could take that. So I can just two that fall within my and Rosemary's coverage. There's Ecolab, it's ECL on the NYSE. It's got 285 million shares outstanding. at trading around 186 for around a $53 billion market cap, 8 billion net debt for a 61 billion enterprise value. They're a world leader in cleaning and hygiene solutions. In 2021, they acquired Purolite, which has developed a specialty ion exchange resin, which does both two of those filtration methods I mentioned. They do both ion exchange and absorption. So it really is an effective solution to pull PFAS out of water. It's a small part of a big company, but we think it's a premier company. It trades at a high multiple for a reason, but it'll be part of their fast-growing life sciences division. And then probably more impactful is Minerals Technology, ticker MTX. They're based in New York City. They've got 32.5 million shares outstanding, trading at $55 for a 1.8 billion market cap, net debt of 800 million for 2.6 billion market cap, enterprise value. They're a vertically integrated specialty minerals company. Through its Seco subsidiary, it internally developed and launched Fluorosorb, which I mentioned before, in 2019. They claim that it's more effective than activated carbon at absorbing PFAS, and it's got faster throughput, and even more importantly, it's cheaper. So they just had an investor day a couple months ago. I attended in the city. I spoke with their head of Fluorosorb for a while. They're very excited about it. They've been building out portable test systems to bring out to utilities and waste management companies to prove out the technology with them. It's in the early stages and it's not in their numbers yet, but it's a potentially very big opportunity for them. And we like the stock. Otherwise, it's a great company.
Thank you, Wayne. Specifically, Wayne, market caps and overall kind of fundamental metrics.
Yeah, so Ecolab's a $53 million market cap. We got them, they're going to do around 15 billion of revenue this year, 2.9 billion of EBITDA. Minerals Technologies is a 1.8 billion market cap, 2.6 billion enterprise value. They should do around 2.2 billion of revenue this year, 370 million of EBITDA approximately. So they're trading around 7 times EBITDA, 10.8 times PE this year.
Thank you. And for everyone, that was billions, not millions, as it relates to Ecolabs. So thank you, everyone. In terms of, we had a question from the field, which was related to drinking water or well water consumption, which is worse. Maybe Rosemary, you can answer that for the group.
Yes. It depends when it comes to the wells. It depends where they are located, and how much effluent from a landfill, for example, has been seeping and making its way into the groundwater at that particular level. When it comes to drinking water, then it is a substantially larger issue, as rivers, lakes, reservoir, and so on are contaminated by the PFAS, which are coming down from the fields or which are actually seeping up from the water table. So water utilities are going to have to clean up the water before it reaches the consumer via our faucets. That requires, they are currently doing some of it, but they are nowhere near the level of acceptable 2 or 4 parts per trillion that the regulators are looking at. Regulation, which, as Wayne mentioned, should be finalized sometime at the end of this year or early 2024. In the meantime, what consumers can do is have filters, either at the entrance of the water into their home or at the faucet level. And based on some research, not all filters are created equal. and the majority of them will take out 60 to 70% of the PFAS, which is not ideal, but is certainly better than nothing. So we are definitely the drinking water is a larger problem, and if only for the fact that it is nationwide and not based on one well in one particular location.
Thank you, Rosemary. We have another question that's come in related to the regulator. And can we just talk about some of the specifics that are happening at the federal regulatory level that will help drive ultimately the growth of the market as you see it through the lens of your corporations? And I'll ask Wayne to address that.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, there's the EPA ruling on drinking water. We expect that to be finalized end of this year, early next year. That's going to drive the utilities to have to invest in remediation, filtration. That's going to benefit all these water testing and remediation companies. And then the next shoe to drop is the landfills, which there's no regulation yet, but once they deem PFAS a hazardous material, they're going to have to capture it and capture it from the leachate seeping into the groundwater. And we think, as an example, minerals technology, that Fluorosorb can be used to filter. It can also be used as a base as a barrier to prevent seepage in the landfill. So once that happens, waste companies are already taking a look at it and taking a look at how they're going to deal with it. But once those regulations come down, there's going to be a lot of movement there.
Thank you, Wayne. Tiffany, and thank you. Tiffany has just put up the speakers today. And again, I extend our thanks to our partners, Rosemary and Wayne, Anand, and Tiffany for the presentation. Thank you for attending today. It looks like we have a few more questions that are in from the field looking for a copy of the slide deck. We'll make that available on the website. And please contact us with any further questions. And thank you for the time today. Thank you to all my partners.